What I'd like to do is talk today briefly about a framework for thinking about global citizenship. It's drawn from a book. There are flyers on your table about how to get it. It's called High Performance with High Integrity, as Steve said. It's based on my nearly 20 years on the front lines of global business as the general counsel of GE, which has 320,000 employees in 100 countries, with revenues approaching $200 billion, profits and cash flow over $20 billion, and half the employees being offshore, an enormous global enterprise. The basic thesis of the book and the framework that I'd like to sort of share with you and that we can then talk about throughout the rest of the conference is that fusing high performance with high integrity is really the twin goals of contemporary companies, and I would submit of global capitalism. What is high performance? In broad outlines, it's strong, sustained economic growth based on superior, high-quality goods and services, which provides durable benefits to shareholders, but also to other stakeholders. The company cannot exist without stakeholders like employees, customers, suppliers, etc. That's high performance. What's high integrity? Three elements. A robust adherence to the spirit and letter of formal, financial, and legal rules. The voluntary adoption of ethical standards across the globe that bind the company and its employees. And employee commitment, third element, the employee commitment to the core values of honesty, candor, fairness, reliability, and trustworthiness. The book first talks about why these twin goals are the foundations of contemporary companies and global capitalism, not the initiative of the month, not the initiative of the year, not the initiative of the decade, but the foundation. And the why, in a nutshell, and again, I don't have time to go into this into great detail, is obviously first the benefit of avoiding catastrophic costs. An integrity miss in this era, as we know, can cost not tens of millions, not hundreds of millions, but billions of dollars, and in fact can sink the company. So that is a negative reason why we should fuse high performance with high integrity. But the positive reasons are that there are benefits inside the company, in the marketplace, and in the larger global society, which I'll talk about in a minute. But let me just give one example. I said one of the aspects of high integrity was employee commitment to core values of honesty, fairness, reliability, and trustworthiness. A good company has to have an employee base that has those values. We've all been in organizations where turf fighting and backbiting and selfishness prevent teams from working together to really accomplish the substance. You have to have those values in your employees. But if you don't have a commitment to adherence to the formal rules, and if you don't take ethical actions, which are obviously will be obvious in a company context in different settings, then you are not going to be able to have that kind of employee base. These things all work together. So there are these benefits, these very affirmative benefits, as well as the benefit of avoiding catastrophic risk. That is why we must do this. Most of the book is about how to do it. There are 8 principles and some associated practices about how a CEO should fuse performance with integrity. And one of the theses of the book is that only the CEO can do it. We've spent way too much time in the corporate governance debate on the boards, and we have spent not nearly enough time in how the CEO actually manages the company, drives principles and practices deep into the organization, all the way to the bottom, with resources, great people, making the business leaders responsible. Without that kind of action, tone at the top is simply eyewash. So this has got to be done by the CEO. So anyway, the book is addressed to a CEO in that context. And it's fundamentally about creating culture. You can have a negative culture where people are afraid of being caught and are deterred, but what you really want to do is create a deep affirmative culture where people want to do the right thing. And that's partly from this kind of leadership that I've talked and making performance with integrity operational with business leaders responsible. Okay, what are a couple of the principles? There are 8. For purposes of today, let me just talk about a couple. And the first one is sort of this second element of integrity, which is adopting global ethical standards. I speak now, I'm actually a senior fellow at Harvard at both the law school and the Kennedy School, as well as a counsel at the law firm. And I talk a lot to students, and I used to talk a lot to people inside of GE. And really the first question you ask is it legal? But the last question you ask is it right? And so you basically have to consider whether or not what you're doing requires a higher standard, a global standard, beyond what the formal rules require. There are many kinds of reasons why you would adopt such a standard. And I want to distinguish, and I'll come back to this, I want to distinguish philanthropy, just the giving of money through your foundation. These are operational things that the company commits to that are basically part of operations. And you can, for example, no bribery, non-discrimination, building greenfield plants to world EHS standards, not to the local standard, ethical sourcing, responsible lending, reductions in greenhouse gases and increases in energy efficiency. These are examples of commitments that the company that I work for made that went beyond what the law requires. Why would you adopt these ethical standards? You might reduce the risk of an integrity miss. You might improve the internal functioning of the company. You might create reputation and advantage in the marketplace. And you might basically enhance the corporation's reputation and standing in the global community and give it credibility in the critical public policy debates that are shape so much of our world and indeed shape so much of what goes on in the emerging markets, where government is either your formal or unseen partner in almost everything that you do. One of the important things to do is have a process for identifying all these issues, and there are many sources for doing that. But the question is, how do you make the decision? And I really believe it is a risk-reward determination. It's not abstract moral philosophy. It's not drawn down from Locke or Kant or Rawls or somebody like that. It's rooted in the history of the company and its mission, but it does obviously have as its touchstone enlightened self-interest. It views the costs associated with taking these steps beyond what the rules require as not just a cost, but as an investment, and that the benefit that accrues may require judgment, not just DRRs or other kinds of financial analyses, and the period may be more than the next quarter. It may be a year or several years. So this is really a critical way to think about it. You should look at it in terms of a cost benefit to the company, because you cannot do everything. It is not pure moral philosophy, but it is a judgment call often. It is not a pure financial call. And as I said, what kinds of examples? No bribery anywhere in the world, regardless of whether the U.S. law applies, private parties, public parties. I'm sorry we don't have time for Q&A, but this was something I deeply believed in and that GE tried to do. And I would also say in this group, the point of the book was not that we were perfect. We were not. We made many mistakes. We were a very human institution. But the point was that we did try. This was something that the senior management really cared about. A related principle in the book is early warning systems, which I think is critically important to understanding this global world. It requires imagination and judgment about what will become important. And part of this conference, I'm sure, is about things that are over the horizon, around the corner, that we really ought to worry about. It's got to be part of the regular business rhythm, and there's sort of three broad categories. One is the monitoring fast-moving legal and financial rules. And you need domain experts to work with the business leaders to have periodic reviews every month, every 3 months, whatever it is, drawing from lots of sources on how the rules are changing. It goes without saying that if you are in any financial institution today that has survived, you are going to be thinking long and hard about where the inevitable regulation is going to be going next year. That's obvious. But this kind of principle of an early warning system applies to all your businesses all around the globe in all the countries where you work. A second area for early warning systems is assessing the emerging demand for ethical corporate action. There are many stakeholder groups out there. There are many NGOs out there. There are many academics there. There are lots of pundits and commenters in the media. This has now become a very big issue, a very big part of what CEOs have to do to manage their companies. So you need an early warning system, not just to deal with this year's priorities, but to begin to develop a sense of what is coming at you and what is important enough that you have to spend time thinking about it.